Let's learn about HDR. Seriously, where are you? Some days when things don't work, nothing works. Okay, HDR, high dynamic range. This is an example of what it can look like. It's something that your eye can see, but that a camera cannot capture in one exposure, in one shot. So the fact that we have detail in the dark spots up here in the clouds is a certain exposure. The fact that we have detail in the bright spots, and we can see detail there, is another exposure. And then the original one that we thought was the best exposure is the third one. When you make HDRs, you can merge 3 to 5 to 7 shots. So you could take your original shot at exactly how you think it's perfect, and then using exposure compensation, you could bump down a third and bump up a third and take those two. Then you could bump down 2/3 and up 2/3 and take those shots. And you could keep doing that and merge them all together. Typically what we're going to do is we're going to take a perfect exposure, and then we're going to go down 2 stops, which is way dark, and we're going to go up 2 stops, which is way bright. And those are the ones that we're going to merge. So those of you that have cameras where you can control that, I would love to see you do that in camera. Take the 3 shots in camera. What we're going to practice today is I'm going to show you how with a single shot we can still fake that or get that same thing if you only took it in one exposure. Here's an example of extreme HDR. And people tend to not be great subjects for HDR. Landscapes maybe, but metallic things, that's why I told you to maybe take a shot out there, look really cool, like old cars or diner signs or anything like that can look really cool. So this is one of the extreme processing in HDR that kind of has that Harry Potter-ish look to it, like very fantasy. A lot of real estate photography is HDR now because they want to get all the different dynamic range, perfect for the inside of the house, but you want to see the awesome sunset outside the house. And there's versions of HDR that look pretty natural, and there are versions that look fake. So here's one that's been processed a lot, but it's some cool metal things that look pretty fun. Inside of a mall that has like a atrium that's really bright, that'd be hard to get everything. That looks a little fakeish, right? This one I think is really interesting because it's like a night scene, but you can see detail up in the night sky yet. So that's probably what your eye would see, but a camera could never capture that broad of a range. This is merging of several pictures. So in camera, if you have a bracketing feature, that's where your camera is going to follow your directions, and if you tell it to take 1 shot regular, 1 shot 2 stops down, 1 shot 2 stops up, if that's where you set your brackets. Some cameras, if you're in burst mode, you push the shutter down, it goes and it takes all 3. Others, you have to manually push the shutter 3 times to get your perfect, your dark, your bright, if you're in bracketing mode. And that's how you avoid bringing your hands down, changing the settings, going back up and guessing. You use that bracketing feature where they're all ready. You push once for the good one, once for the dark, once for the light. So we tend to do extremes. This is 1 stop, but remember, a stop on your camera is a doubling or a halving of light. So you're letting in twice as much or cutting down by double. So it's pretty dramatic. Helpful tips, if you can, are to shoot on a tripod, shoot in aperture priority mode so that your depth doesn't change. Whatever you decide, you want a large depth of field or a small depth of field where only one thing is in focus. You don't want that to change shot to shot. If you have bracketing, use that. And it can be done with 1 single shot, which we're going to see. The cool thing that you can do that I've just learned about is instead of dynamic range bracketing, you can do focal bracketing, where like it's the same shot, but you have an aperture of 2 on the first one, an aperture of 6, an aperture of whatever, and then you blend those together and have different things, and like a blur here but focused here, and a blur here and focused here. You can merge.
I was able to do bracketing with my white balance at one yesterday.
Oh, you bracketed white balance?
Yeah, it had a grid where it had like magenta, green, blue, and I can't remember what else.
Yeah.
And so you could like have it go 3 ways this way or 2 ways.
Really?
This way. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so that's a quick rundown. Now we're going to attempt to do it, and I'll see how many glitches I can have myself in Photoshop and or Bridge. So back in Bridge, let's go to the chapter 6, and we're going to demo a few different versions of these. So 164 is the first demo that we're going to start with. 164 is actually the tips on setting up your camera. The next one we're going to skip. We're going to jump into page 168, creating realistic images. So this is where you want it to look good, not fake. And the image that they want us to use is, we're going to choose Realistic 1, shift-click Realistic 2, and Realistic 3. Get those 3 selected in Bridge. This is in the other folder that you downloaded, the Chapter 6 folder. And as you can see, we have one that's probably the best. We have one that's dark, but any of the bright things have a little bit more detail. And then we have an overexposed image that really gives us some more detail in the dark areas. So these are the 3 extremes that we want to get loaded up. Got them? All right, so from here, hopefully this is going to work again. Tools, Photoshop, Merge to HDR Pro is the option that you want to check. Finally. I feel like a crash is coming.
Same. I got my numbers.
I feel like a crash is coming. Yours looks good. That's what I'm expecting to see, but... Oh my gosh.
It takes.
Okay, I'll be patient before I freak out here. Oh my gosh. How am I in Photoshop 2018? This is killing me. The screen that you guys have is correct. The one that I see is absolutely what we need to see. Eventually we get to Photoshop, but not immediately. Photoshop, quit, go away. Had it with you. Bridge, go away. Had it with you. The good news is in past years when I've demoed this, I've had better videos, so I'll put the better videos up if you need to go back and reference these, because this is just not working well. 2018, I do not want you. Remove. I'm going to show you, if I ever get there. That says 18. Oh, for crying out loud. Do we all have 2018?
Yeah, my computer didn't have 2019. I have 19.
Yeah, 19 should exist. If you go up here to your Adobe Creative Cloud icon, back in like the Finder view, and go to Apps, this is going to tell you what you need to update or not update, but how are you not signed in? For crying out loud. Mine says I need to update.
I just assumed I was.
Insane.
Wait, how are you even using the programs then?
That's weird. So we've been grabbing pictures out of Bridge and saying Tools, Photoshop, Merge to HDR or Photo Merge. If you have them open in Photoshop, which I do right now, I'm trying to avoid any other problems. The way you do this from Photoshop with the 3 images open is just a little bit different. You choose File, Automate, and then all these same things show up again, Photo Merge and HDR Pro. So from within Photoshop, I'm avoiding Bridge to avoid yet another problem. It says choose the files you want to use. I'm just going to say add my open files because they're already there, and then OK. And hopefully I'm going to be at the same screen you guys are real quickly. There we go. That looks similar to what you guys have, right? Okay. So to make realistic looking images, which is our goal for this one, we're going to switch to 32-bit mode. So from up here at the mode option at the top right, we have 32, 16, and 8-bit mode. We're going to switch it into 32. We have a few changes here in our options. We have more of a histogram showing up. And then at the bottom, we see the 3 original images. We see the exposure value 0, meaning that's exactly as it was taken. We see the exposure value of a -2 and a +2. So all 3 of those are down at the bottom. So when we choose 32-bit, all the sliders are hidden and replaced with a set white point preview histogram. So all we have to do here is to make sure that the complete toning in Adobe Camera Raw checkbox, right here, this one right below, is turned on, and we need to click one button, the Tone and ACR button at the bottom. So this is an easy one to do. So in 32-bit mode, our only option is to come down and click Tone and ACR. The bracketed images are going to be combined into one image, and they're going to open in Camera Raw for tweaking. So after that, this is what I got popped up. This is my Camera Raw view. From here, we can see that we kind of have the best of all the worlds. We got some detail in our dark floor. We can see detail in the shadows. We have detail in the highlights, except for where they're totally blown out. That's fine. But we can further tweak it from this point. So some things that we might want to do, increase the exposure just a little bit if you think it's too dark. So pop up the exposure a smidge. Increase contrast. These are just some options they're talking about in the book, but as you do it, you can see the results that you're getting. So play around with these sliders. Open up your shadows, which means pulling the shadows to the right. You can see how you're getting more detail over at the lower right corner in the flooring by opening up the shadows. Clarity, that's kind of an interesting one. If you pull it super far, you'll see what it does, and if you pull it to the left, you'll see it gives this like blurry look. So you might just want to pop up the clarity a little bit. The windows are a little blown out, so maybe if we pull down on the highlights, we'll get a little bit of detail there or make it look a little bit better, a little bit less glare on the floor. Whenever you get it looking like you're happy with in Camera Raw, we're going to click the OK button, bring it into Photoshop.
Why is this really weird? Does anybody do you have this? This like red outline of the light? Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, I do
Like,
too.
kind of gross. I don't know. It's probably just a problem. The 3 shots getting up.
When you're happy-ish with it, go ahead and click Open, or OK, whatever it is at the bottom, because that's going to bring it into Photoshop. Back in Photoshop, I've got way too many views here. I don't like this at all. Window, workspace. Okay, that's better. So now I'm back in Photoshop, but we're still in that 32-bit mode, which Photoshop doesn't have as many options with that. We either need to convert it to a 16-bit or Photoshop's usual 8-bit. So we're going to go up to the Mode menu, up here, Image Mode, and then we're going to look at either 8 bits per channel or 16 bits, and we want to go to the 8 bits per channel. And it changes a little bit. Are you guys all to one flattened layer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's changed. That's a new change then in the software because we used to have to flatten it down. All 3 would still be there, but now we have it already flattened, so that's okay. That's not showing up because we're already flattened, so that's different than it has been. So that's one way of creating a photorealistic shot by using that 32-bit mode and just clicking that one button. So this is good for real estate, like interiors of homes. It looks like your eye would see it. It doesn't look funky or goofy. As I'm looking around, I see some that look like really, like, they look like they've been HDR processed, right? This one doesn't. It looks very realistic. All right, let's close. This bite, as you can see, is its own new document, untitled HDR, so you would need to save it. Here's the 3 pieces that we started with. So close all these files out. And yeah, you don't need to save any of them. I'm going to save the remainder of these tutorials for next week. So what I'm going to have you do for the rest of class time, if you want to, is practice making a panorama out of the shots you took outside, and or work on editing those 3 pictures that are due next week. Next week, your assignment, besides the 3 pictures, is to take photos that we can make panoramas of that can be your true assignment that you turn in, and take photos that we can do HDR processing with. There's some really cool things we can do. So those are the photos that you're going to want to bring in next week. We'll finish these demos and then we'll have work time to build your own HDRs and build your own panos. Okay? So the rest of class, if you would like to work on any of this editing while you're here, you can. If you are at your limit of learning and you want to close up shop, I get it. But we're going to look at a few more really cool HDR techniques next week. So as long as you come prepared with the raw files ready to go, or the existing files, raw is the wrong word, we can make them.
What are the 3 ones that we're editing? One of the straight out of cameras, one of the mask out of cameras?
Suk is not one of them.
Oh, so it's portrait, environmental.
It's in Blackboard. It's these 3 right here. Portrait, environmental portrait, and landscape. Yeah, so the edits that you need to make are a specific size, and there's a drop box for each of them. And have it be one of the pictures that you've already submitted. So if you can improve it by cropping it and get better composition that way, do that. If you can, whatever you need to do with coloring, levels, horizon line, make the sunsets pop even more, whatever you need to do.